Hello there, this is Jack for That's No Moon. Today I'm going to talk you through how I do skin tones. Now I've got two figures here for Legion. One will be doing a pale Caucasian skin tone on, so that'll be for the Clone Trooper. We don't really have much say in what colour skin they are. I've done this on a white prime because we've been painting the armour. So this will show you what it's like to paint skin tone onto a white prime. And then we've got this Fleet Trooper who I've modified to have an Adrian helmet, so he looks like you can see that. So he looks like a Harlem Hellfighter, and we'd be painting him with a dark skin tone. The Harlem Hellfighters were a black company in World War One, so they'll fit in with my army quite nicely as sort of an assault troop thing to jump out of the tank that we painted in the last video. So just as an example on some bigger figures on what sort of skin tone we're going to be getting, here's a Kingpin that I did. So you can see there's variations across his head to give him some depth. For a white skin tone, for a Star Wars themed, here's Commander Pons. We'll also talk through how to do eyes as well. And then for darker skin tones, we've got Luke Cage for Marvel Crisis Protocol. So Luke is is a really dark skinned character. So that was quite light on the highlights. Mace Windu, also quite dark skinned in the cartoons, but he is, with some nice definition on his face, he can be highlighted quite well. But we'll talk through sort of the steps on highlighting and how to get the best result there. So let's start with the Caucasian skin colour. Actually no, we start with the eyes. Let's start with the eyes. So we'll get a nice fine brush. So I've got an absolutely decimated brush here. You can see it's a tiny point on it. Really like using these for just dotting in the eyes. So I'm using Vallejo Deck Tan for the white of the eyes. Alternatively, you can use something like Scale Colours White Sands, or just an ivory colour if you've got one, Screaming Skull for example. If you are using Citadel paints, you just put a tiny blob on our palette, and then fill it up with a bit of water. You'll have to excuse me, my arm is at a really awkward angle, just so we can keep things in frame. So that's how much we've got on the brush. It's quite heavily loaded for the size of the bristles. And then the best way to do it is to go with the eye. So left to right. They're not very well defined on Legion figures, but we'll do our best. So push your bristle into the corner of the eye and drag it to the edge. And because you've thinned your paint, it'll then drag into the crevice quite nicely. And the same here, push into the corner and pull to the edge. Now it doesn't matter if this goes a bit awry, because we're basically going to go back in with our skin tone when we do the base layer and tidy up that edge, so you can make them, if you paint your eyes huge, as long as you don't gunk up that hole, you can easily correct it and bring it back to the right size. So again, let's do our Harlem Hellfighter Fleet Trooper into the corner and pull. Hopefully you can see this on the camera once I've finished. Unfortunately I've got to hold it close to my face because of my ailing eyesight. It all comes for us in the end. Okay, so if you're priming with black, you will need to probably put in a couple of layers just so that black doesn't show through. I would recommend priming in black anyway, and the simple reason is if you prime everything in black and then you paint over it, if you miss something, say underneath his leg, you're not going to notice it. If it was white, it's going to stand out quite a lot. So there we go. You can see I've messed up that left-hand eye, or his left-hand eye. But we'll correct that when we come to do the skin tone. So the next step after that is just putting in the pupil. So just take your black, you don't want this too watery, and you need to make sure that that ivory has dried before you go in with this. You don't want this to bleed. So just pick where you want the pupils to be. Now I always go over the skin with this, because you just want to drag your tip down. You'll see in a minute that I've painted all over his cheek to get this pupil in. And drag down. Doesn't matter if they're perfect. At the end of the day, when you're playing on a 6x3 table, no one is looking at these eyes. Absolutely no one will. And if they do, you've had an attempt at it, so it's to be commended. So you can see he looks like something out of Kiss. We'll do the same on this figure. Be a little easier to hide the black. Again, dot in them pupils. They don't have to be identical. We're not here to create works of art. This is not going to win you a Golden Demon prize or anything like that. This is just to get these things onto the table. So you can see we've covered up quite a bit of the ivory on that. So next step, now we will do the Caucasian. So these are the skin tones that I will be using. I always use this range of colours. So we'll start with Scale Colours Pink Flesh. This will be equivalent to Bugman's Glow for Citadel. Not quite sure what the Vallejo equivalent is. There's a handy website called Dakka Dakka, D-A-K-K-A, that has a paint conversion chart if you want to see what my colours are compared to yours. I always put a dollop of violet in. This is completely optional, and this is because I don't wash the skin tone. So I create the shadows with the violet, and then I treat this as the wash built in. So tiny dollop of violet there. Now, to go around the eyes, we're going to put a bit of black in first. So you get quite a muted pink there. And we're just going to tidy up around the eyes. And you'll see just how bad I've done on that pupil. But again, are we bothered? Not really. We've done it. From a distance it looks like an eye. It's not like we're putting eye colours in and giving him a makeup tutorial. So you just want to give him the Batman treatment, just go around his eyes. This Clone Commander's got tiny eyes, so they're actually quite hard to do. However, like I said, we've got white, we've got pupil. It's a win in my book. And if you make a mistake, you can always go back in with your ivory, go straight over it again, give it a couple of thin layers, pop your pupil on, and then restart this step. But if I were you, do it first time. If you mess it up, just say, nah, battle damage. he's lost an eye. I've got a clone commander like that. He looks like Wolf, or I've missed the pupil. But anyway, we digress. So, a little dollop of violet into the pink flesh. Now you don't want this to be overly purple. Something along those lines. And then we just block in avoid his hair so you can see where you're going to put that in. For the hair, while I'm putting this on, I might as well talk you through it. For a clone trooper, go in with a black. While it's still wet, get yourself a dark grey and wet blend. Now when I say wet blend is, you're mixing the boundary of those two colours on the miniature. So you're going with the black, and on the top where the light's going to hit him, put your grey in, and then just with a wet brush feather that boundary around the crown of his head. And that's pretty much all I do for a clone trooper. Again, no one's going to notice. If you're going to the tournament to win a painting prize, you can do texture. If you want to get a fine brush and brush in a load of finer hairs, that's entirely up to you though. We're just interested in getting tabletop ready so that your army looks good on the table. It is at this stage that I would recommend you do the hair. So we might as well do that and show you what I mean. Hopefully we've got the colours up here, if not we'll have to skip it. So you probably will need a couple of thin coats, because if you look, his forehead's quite patchy. If we give it another thin coat, you'll get nice smooth coverage. Now that is the problem with painting with a white primer, is that the white will show through. At least with a black primer, it's acting as a way of removing the saturation of the colour. So it does darken the miniature down once the paint dries. However, this will be more true to the colour you've mixed. And that is about it there. So, have we got the colours that we want for dyeing metallics? That'll do. Okay, let's do some hair. So we've already got black on the palette. Thin it out a little bit. Now this scale colours, again, they're a very matte finish. So this will come out very dark, this black. So if you're using Citadel, go in with something like an Abaddon black maybe, or a Corvus black, if those are still the names. And then something like a Mechanicus standard mixed into it. So that's the general outline of the hair. Looks like something out of the movie Grease. And at any point you are more than able to say, no, that's a step that I don't want to put in, like with what we're about to do here. So I've got graphite, which is sort of more of a medium grey, I suppose, but we'll mix it into the black to get that darker grey. And then on the top, where it's still wet, just slap it in there. Actually, want a bit more of the lighter grey. There we go, so that's his terrible dye job. And then we're just going to, with our damp brush, just integrate these two colours on the fly. There are better ways of doing this, but this is the way I go about it. It's very easy. Once you get your eye in, you keep the paints wet. You could use something like a retarder. I think I've got a Vallejo one. It'll just slow the drying of these paints so that you can work with them for longer. So what we'll do is we'll actually leave that to dry because it's starting to come away from the primer because the paints are very thin. And then what I'll do is I'll go in with a thin black and we'll glaze over the top of it, blend in that boundary. But for now, we'll go back to the violet skin tone. We'll just check round. So here we've overstepped. Probably not in frame. I need to pay attention to that. You can see this side's gone a bit rounded, so we can just nick a bit out of there, square it off there, and that's that. So there we go. So back to the hair. That's looking dry enough. Get some black, thin it down with some water. Should look like that on your fingernail. My manky fingernails, you don't want to see them. Don't bite your nails, kids. And that just makes it more uniform. Painting hair is one of the worst things I find. If I could have a bold clone trooper, I would. So, there we go. So, at this stage, if you haven't put the violet in, that's perfectly alright. Just take something like, where is it? Reichland Flesh Shade. Wash that over it, wait for it to dry. Don't let it seep too much. You don't want to absolutely saturate the face because you don't want to lose the detail. Slap that on, wait for it to dry about 15 minutes. It needs to be completely dry. At the moment, we're now going to, or for the moment rather, should speak the correct English. we're going to go back in with just the pink flesh. So this is going to focus on everything but the deepest recesses. So we're looking at the crease in the lips, we're looking at the corners of the eyes, you know, those sorts of areas. And I always find a good starting point is the bridge of the nose. Just drag your brush straight down, and that sort of gives you a focal point to judge the rest of the face on. So we'll hit both the nostrils, we'll hit the eyebrows. He's got that crease in his brow there, and then we'll come right across the brow. We're not quite going to touch where the eyebrows are because he has got a bit of a furrow. We are going to go straight down to there. Cheekbone as well, straight in. Keep your paints thin at this point, because there's nothing worse than doing it too thick and not being able to see the colour underneath. You want to be able to see that colour. That's what's going to give you the smoother transition without having to sit there and blend and glaze and go through all of the rigmarole associated with that. We just want to get these colours on. Hit the ear. Don't neglect the back of the head. Up the cheek, other ear, and then this side of the brow. And his cheekbone here, down his jowl. And that's pretty much it for that. So that's where we're at now. Now if you want a pinkier, more, shall we say, sunburnt look, leave him here. This is a perfectly acceptable place to stop. From a distance, that looks like a decent face. So if you really need to just bang these out, do that, stop, move on. We're going to go into a few more highlights just so that we can start boosting some of the facial definitions. This is the same principle for any part of the body. Hands as well. Hands are especially easy because you just do this step. You take the basic flesh and you do all of the fingers, leaving the folds in between the fingers. They've usually got quite pronounced knuckles, so then you're going with your highlights and you'll hit each knuckle, and it'll just make it stand out and it'll make him look like he's really gripping his rifle. Maybe don't do that, but you get what I mean. So next level is basic flesh. This is like a Cadian flesh tone. So if you're doing the violet, you've done the violet, you've then done the basic flesh. If you're doing the wash, you've done the basic flesh, the wash, and then re-establish the basic flesh. So now we go into Cadian / basic flesh. I misspoke earlier, pink flesh. And this is the basic. So again, center yourself on his nose. Pull it down. Nostrils. Drag towards the point that you want to be the most highlighted. Your pigment in your paints will always be dragged to the point where you lift your brush. It's just a preferential thing for the paint to do. So when you're doing brows, the sharp point is always at the edge of the brow, furthest away from the middle of the face. So that's where the direction that your brush should go. Same with the cheekbones. So that is the highest point there. So brush it towards the middle and brush it from the eye to the middle. And there we go. Chin, brush it to the middle, brush it to the middle, come at it from both sides. Lip, you've got the folds in your, what is that bit called there? You've got that little dent in the middle of your face, under your nose. So brush towards that middle point. I'm not a biologist. Then you've got the furrow in his brow, just hit that. And then brush out this brow. then depending on where you want your light source to be, that is a fairly important thing to decide when you're highlighting. So we're going to have our light source on this side of him. So let's say basically means that this rifle is casting a shadow, the sun is going to be up here, something like that. So this side will be brighter than the other side. So if we just drag it round, and you'll see this corner of his forehead will start getting a little lighter each time we hit it. So bottom of the cheeks, brushing down this time to accentuate his jaw, top of the ears. You don't need to go too high with the highlights, excuse me, on the back of the neck. So this is basically going to be in shadow from this point onwards. I would only do one highlight back here. That's what I normally leave it at. Again, just edge highlight the ears. You don't need to pick out all the folds inside and all that jazz. Again, the cheekbone is still going to catch some light. So we'll hit that. There's the nostril. We should put a bit of a highlight here. We don't want the forehead to be dark. At the end of the day, his forehead is facing up, it's facing towards the light source. There is going to be a certain degree of highlight, and then there'll be a shine on that one side. So at that point, I would say, if you're not confident with going any further with the highlighting, absolutely stop there. You've picked out the main definitions. You can see he's got a brow line, you can see he's got nostrils, you can see he's got a jawline. There is no obligation to go any further. However, we will. This is golden skin. I'm not quite sure what the GW equivalent would be, because light skin will be your Kislev flesh. So feel free to skip this one. I just like this warmer tone, especially on the clones. He's based on a Maori essentially, so he needs to be a bit warmer. So get your brush loaded up. Again, centre ourselves on the nose. Now, with these ones, don't go as far up the nose. Hit the brow. Your highlights will always look quite stark when you first do them. They will dry down and they will look more muted, so don't worry. Do absolute minimal titivation. Hit that cheek, let's go down his face, hit that lip, hit that side of his chin. So you can see we're starting to build up this side of his face as being in more light. Hit the ear. Skip the back of the neck. We'll hit his top of his ear here. And I'm going to leave this side as it is. So you can start to see that there's a bit of a difference from the sides of the faces. So, final highlight. This will be the absolute top of where we're going to go. This will be the light skins. This is your Kislev. And we're only going to do little dots to highlight this. This is where the sun is catching the most. Personally, I feel anything after this is unnecessary and is down to personal taste. So we'll just go tip of his nose to his nostril, we'll then go eyebrow and top of his forehead. So hit the top of his cheek here. Just the corner of his chin and the top of his lip. And that is it. Sorry, I lied. Top of his ear. That's it. That is as far as you need to take a Caucasian skin tone. If you want to, you can then get fancy with it. You can take washes and, you know, really put some different lights on it. If you wanted it to be sort of like Umbara, you could put some different inks. There's plenty of playing around, but this is a good starting point just to go, this is where my light is, this is bits in shade, and you can see as you turn the model, you start getting that purple hue. Purple hue in there, if we get the light on him. Okay. As opposed to his highlighted side there. This side is quite in shade. So that's as far as you take that one. So moving on to our darker skin tone. Get the light sorted. There we are. So base colour, we're going to switch to Vallejo paints. I haven't found a better version for this. Maybe something like, where is it? It was here somewhere. That's not it. That's it there. Maybe something like a black leather. I do find this to be a bit too purpley though. So we'll stick with this one. This has got just enough brown in it for it to be a good base colour. We are going to highlight quite high up though. So, thin it down. And we'll start with the eyes. Now this model has got facial hair, so we do need to tackle that. Let's get under the eyes and shape them out. Touch up there, hit it in there. This will be quite hard to see, because it is really a dark brown. So there's this funky eye. So, good example of making a mistake. That's bled it into his eye. Get a wet brush, clean, and sweep it away. It's acrylic paint, so water will take it away. You can go back to where you were. Just wait for that to dry before we put any more paint on it, because the paint will then bleed into the water. So for the time being, we'll base coat his hands. There we go. Right, this part of the face is dried. We're going to put more paint on so that it's quite thick. Just because I don't want this running again. There we go. Again, it's not perfect, but it'll do. And there we are. So again, if you want to wash, there's not much point, especially this dark of a brown on a black prime, something like an Agrax earth shade. just trying to wash the eyes. So to highlight, we're going into saddle brown. This is more a reddish brown. And it's the same principles essentially. Mix this paint up in a while. There we go. So you might be able to see there how pink that is. It's more of a clay colour. So if we get it, you want to mix it into your German camo black brown. So we'll start with that sort of mix. Thin it down. So start on this neck piece here. Just pick out where the light's going to hit. It's quite handy to use an overhead light for this, because you can just hold it in the angle that you want it, and you can say, well, there's light hitting there, so it's safe to assume that's making it past the helmet. There's light hitting there, there's light hitting there, there's light hitting here. Now because he's got his head turned, his neck muscles are showing. So you'll want to keep the crease that goes down the side. Again, hit the bridge of the nose. This one's a smoother nose than the clone. Under the brow, under the eyes rather. Cheeks. Now this bit will be in quite a bit of shade. We'll hit that muscle there, and then we'll also hit the chin. We'll leave the lips quite dark. And as I was saying with hands, so you can see all the creases. Just paint anything that's raised. Around the front. Thumb, finger, 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 palm. Same over here. Same principle. Top of the finger, top of the finger, back of his hand, like that. There we go. So again, we decided at this point where our light would be coming from. We're going to go with this side just because it's the more accessible side, and it's the side that's most likely to be facing your opponent, so they get to have a nice look at how you've highlighted a face. So that looks dry enough now. A little bit long. Mix in a bit more of your saddle brown. So you want to get to a point where you're happy that that looks like a coloured man's skin. We'll hit this cheek here. Again, pull the pigment towards where the highlight's going to be. Side of the nose. His nostrils are less pronounced on this model. I do believe these were meant for a white French soldier. We will commandeer them for our purposes. So we'll just hit this cheek here, just because I want it to be a gradual transition to the highlight over the face. So top of the hand, top of this finger, top of this finger. You want to be going a little less towards the base of the top of the wrist, base of the hand, just to keep that smooth transition up to where the light is. The light's on this side, So these fingers are going to get highlighted quite a bit. So the upright hand, obviously the fingers that face the light source are going to get a good amount of light. Palm of his hand, bottom of these fingers, other side of his palm, top of his thumb. Now you won't be able to make out in the video, but he has got clearly defined parts of his finger. They can be accentuated with 3 little highlights under each knuckle, so it looks like the light is being blocked where the knuckle bulges out. That'll just be dandy. So that's that one. And now, if anything, black skin is a lot easier. It absorbs a lot of light. It has a very small reflective point. So we're going to add in Teneri Yellow. This is the equivalent to Ice Yellow from Vallejo. Not quite sure on the equivalent for Games Workshop. But just start mixing in a little bit more each time. At the end of the day, you can do as many of these highlights as you need. It's your model. This is art. Art is appreciated no matter how it's executed. The only person that's got to be happy with it is you. Now there obviously is much easier ways to do skin tones. You can prime white, and then you can just put a, what's the contrast called? Is it Gulliman Flesh contrast? Put that on. You could do then your mid-level highlight, and that's done. Or you can prime black. You can dry brush the face very lightly with a grey, and then even lighter with the white. So you're just catching the highest things. Then do the wash, and it'll naturally highlight it for you. That should work for a darker skin tone, something like maybe a Wildwood contrast paint. If you've highlighted enough to show where the features are and the highlights will be. And if you're doing something like an Indian skin tone, where it's a very pale brown, you should really dip into the basic flesh tones for your highlights. Mix them into the browns. I don't have a figure that could be painted that way. Unfortunately, I've painted my Sikh soldiers already. But they were painted to this point, and instead of mixing in the saddle brown, I started mixing in the flesh tones that were quite pinkish. They're sort of like they have that. The highlight is more of a pinkish tone than this. This is very much a dull down brown. So a bit more Teneri Yellow. So now you can see we're getting into the higher highlights. Getting into quite a pale brown now. So bottom of this neck muscle, edge of this cheek, edge of the chin, tip of the nose, knuckles, tips of the fingers, again over here, tops of the knuckles, tips of the fingers, and then we've got those segmented knuckles. So there we go. I'll probably do one more with the Teneri yellow mixed in, just to get a bit of a shine on the cheek, on the nose, base of the chin, especially on this hand. This hand's raised to that light source. So tips of the fingers, tips of the thumb, palm of his hand, top of that bit there, side of the palm here. Tips of the fingers on this hand that are facing the light. And that's where I'd leave it. Now you can do things like mixing in ambient lighting again, if you want to say, actually there's a light source. If you want to do stubble, you could mix in like a deep sea blue for the moustache. Again, just take your black. African American hair is black. In general, I won't say an absolute. But of the time, perhaps hair dye was a little less prevalent for anyone in that matter. So once that's done, because this is our unit leader, he's going to be the experienced officer, we'll mix a bit of that graphite in. And because the clumps of hair are defined as lines, we can easily go in and pick out all the way around, and then once we've done that, we'll then go to a lighter grey and just do it on the side where we'd get the reflection. So just waiting for that to dry. It's the bonus of it being warm today, everything's drying quite quickly. So in with the graphite that has a bit of black in it. Again, I've got to get my old man eyes in. We don't want to colour the whole beard grey, just needs hints of it where the light's catching it. And then on this side, where the light source is, we'll just add a few streaks at the end of the hairs. Like that. So, that concludes it. Not quite sure how clear that is, but you can see we've got a highlighted face on there. It's darker on that side. The hands stand out quite nicely, and once his uniform is painted, it'll bring out that colour a bit more. I mean, this is quite a bad example because it's all black, so it's quite muted. But that's how to do the two main skin tones. You can have a play around and go lighter or darker with either of them. It's entirely up to you. These are your models. Have at. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hopefully that's been helpful to you all. I'll see you in the next one.